Hey everybody, Tim here from Workshop 12, and we are back working on the Nemesis. So Sunday afternoon, COVID, what better way to isolate yourself and lock yourself into a garage? So today we're going to be working on a rear bumper beam or bumper frame area. So this area is designed to basically hold this lower kind of fog and reverse light here at the bottom, and then also some license plate at the back. So the idea is that it's going to kind of create this beam structure. So if we look at the back of the car here, we've got a couple of areas that I think that I'm likely going to cut off these little nubs here, because they're actually going to get in the way of the diffusers coming up from back behind here as well. So the idea is running some structures out here in the back so that the light can be down here and the license plate here, and then essentially making it so this top supports that will likely come back here and connect into these mounting holes is removable, so that we can pull that right off to be able to pull the transmission out, and I'm not worried about how far back I can actually move the transmission to pull that out of the back of the motor. So first step is cutting off these guys back here, which is going to be fun, and then those will be kind of some connection points for us to be able to run back the bottom points of the bumper beam.
Okay, so we got those pieces
Shaved off.
laying over there, and after a whole bunch of grinding, able to get it nice and smooth. So we got two good contact patches there to be able to weld onto. So those will be kind of my two main connection points. I might need to move these jack stands back in a little bit just so that gives me a little bit more access to weld on the underneath seam of that joint. So next is trying to lay out our distance and kind of the bottom piece here of how wide I want it for the bottom of that fog light, and making sure that I've got enough room in there to build a little plastic housing for it as well. So that's the next steps. Managed to lay out a template on the floor here. So we've got a 5-inch piece that will be at the back. It's kind of the narrowest part right at the very back of the transmission. Kind of drew my center line, my square line back out here. So we've got our 5 inches there to the center line on this back beam, which representing the back beam on the chassis. We've got 19.5 inches across there, so just catching all of my intersection points while keeping everything square. So now I'm just going to cut out the notches on the sides of these so that I can weld all the ends together, keep these within the 19.5 inches, and then it should translate onto the car. Alright, so we've got our rear bumper beam here, and I figured what I would do is I would take the time to actually create, the bottom aluminum plate that's going to cover it here. It's a lot easier to work on this when it's off the car than trying to do it underneath. So basically created a piece here that is, a little bit smaller than the edges. Drilled my holes in along those, and then just marked them onto the bottom panel here. So that's going to be kind of the under tray underneath. I gave a little bit of an overhang here so it'll kind of cover over into where it's welded on to the other part. Now, one of the other things that I'm putting on is a tow hook on the back here. So I'm going to end up essentially notching out the metal down here so this sits underneath the underneath the sheet of aluminum. So I'm going to have to essentially notch this part here so that it can sit in here, and then create a little frame back in the back here for these things to bolt down into with the supplied hardware here. So should look nice once I've got it all notched and welded in there so that it can kind of sit in flush. And then all of these are going to have nice little finishing washers on them. So I need to drill and tap these sections of the steel. It's 1/8 inch thick, so it should act as a nice little nut to screw everything into, and see if I can get all of that work done. Alright, rear tow hook is good to go. I've got my mounting holes down in there and 2 cross beams to go across, so I'll have 4 bolts in on 4 different connection points across here, and it's sunk down in. I've also gone through and I've tapped all of the screws. Now what I'm going to need to do here is, because the bolts sit up a little high on these corners, I'm going to end up drilling holes big enough to get a socket through on these so that the floor pan covers the whole thing here, the tray, the aluminum tray, and then enough room to, if I need to, get some sockets on these that'll just go through. It'll also provide some drain holes for any kind of water that might get caught in the bottom of the pan here too. So next up is just fitting up that pan, getting those holes through there, and everything should be set. Alright, tow hook is good to go. Recessed in there. Got some recess holes for these bolts. I'm gonna have to get some ones that are a little bit longer. They don't quite reach all the way through my bars. And then we've got all of our nice little finishing washers on the bottom of the aluminum B, so I know which way that it goes. So now I gotta disassemble this, bring this apart so that I can start building essentially the uprights that are gonna come off here, going back in an angle. Created a 3D printed housing here for the 370Z rear fog that's going to sit right down at the bottom back there. So this is going to end up sitting back in here in that frame. So I've got to figure out what the angle is that's going to come off of there for this. This is kind of just a prototype printed with just some PETG on my home printer. I'll end up getting this printed on in nylon, black nylon, so that it'll hold up to all the elements from the outside of the car, all the debris and everything at the back of the vehicle. So that is the next step, is let's tear this apart, let's get those uprights figured out, and then that'll allow me building the mounting spots for this guy as well as the license plate on the back.
Okay, a bunch of fabrication later, and we're pretty good with the tail. Well, I guess you'd call it the bumper. It's the best way that I can actually kind of describe what we created. So it's going to hold my lower fog light and reverse light, as well as the license plate. If you take a look here, essentially what I created was this aluminum sheet or plate to go over the whole back, just to kind of make it look nice and clean. So there'll end up being a contrasting, the frame here will end up being painted red, and then just leaving the raw aluminum, or maybe just clear coat it just to stop it from oxidization. And then essentially I'd put different anchors, threaded holes for some little washer connectors to hold everything in. These ones here loose, they're the ones that will actually connect at the very bottom bumper beam, just to hold it from moving around. And then at the top, we've got 2 bolts that are going to bolt into the back. So this whole rear bumper will come off, so that if I need to pull the transmission out or anything like that, I've got space to be able to pull it. The other little neat thing that I have here is these little top bolts. So they're actually the LEDs that light up the license plate, so I get kind of a 2-in-1 space saver there. Still going to try to figure out where and how I want to mount a reverse camera on the top here. Might make a little hood that's kind of wrapped in carbon or something like that.
just for my reverse camera. But that's the rear bumper. So now the next step is actually just fixing it onto the back of the car and getting that ready to go. So on the back here, we've got kind of just some guides holding up the rear bumper beam. I got a little bit of grinding here to get it up flush. So we need to weld that in so it's coming out straight here. Then I'm going to bolt on that piece onto the back, and then I'm going to create my connecting pieces out here with a bolt-on face. So that bolt-on face will be able to weld here, and then I'm going to bring some supports up from the bottom here to that bumper beam to be able to basically tie it all off. So the things are connected top, bottom, and then a support in here is just so that that's not just a beam coming back. So next thing up is grinding and getting these guys welded on nice and straight, and then we'll start working on those other beams.
All right, and we're back. It's been about a week. I actually ran out of welding wire last time, so I had to cut a few things short. So hopefully able to finish up the rear end of the car here today. A lot of the main things that we're going to be working on is welding in the different pieces in here, creating our cross pieces, welding and threading some different nuts in the ends of those, and getting that structure complete. So let's get at it. Okay, welds are complete. We've got our top across here. The bottoms have been welded in as well. So the next step across the back here is creating little plates with welded nuts on the back that I can then fasten here to hold them in place to make sure that the angle of the bolt coming through is going into the right direction. And then we can kind of tack weld those, take this off, and then weld everything in. Okay, that looks like it has it all done there. Got all the welds done on the supporting beams on both sides. Come back, I actually bolted on the aluminum floor pan there, if you can see it. Got washers on there, put the tow hook on, got everything all set on the back. So everything all comes back nice and square. I'm gonna make a few adjustments here and there, but generally speaking, that has the rear bumper structure all set and ready to go. So that was a big job. Took a few days to be able to get it done. Just metal fabrication takes forever. So one more project done, and on to the next one. So we'll see you in the next video.